make an appointment with me. Okay, so you should be seeing the welcome screen here, and it should start to be recording, and it does say recording. And I'm gonna go to the next slide. Is it gonna, I can't do this, okay. And getting ready, that's actually for Google, building Blackboard, quizzes, tests, and surveys. I'm not gonna cover surveys so much today in terms of building a survey and building a quiz, same functionality. But I will, there's a lot of objectives. Like I said, usually this workshop's a little bit longer, and I just pretty much want you to get an overview of the test and survey tool, and then we can kind of dig in a little to question types and things like that as well. And so I did want to ask both of you really kind of quickly, what is your experience with creating online tests? I asked a little bit about the webinar, and are there any specific things that I should be aware about for your tests and quizzes if you're thinking of creating any? Karen, you want to go first?
Well, like I said, I've only created them like in my textbook area and then imported them. I don't think there's anything like weird. Typically multiple choice, true and false, maybe some short answers.
Okay.
That's about it.
That's helpful. What kind of questions that you normally do?
Yeah.
Ed?
I've used ExamView and the test generator and a pool generator in Moodle, as well as the assignment submissions.
Okay. Does your test generator, do you still have tests in Moodle you might want to use?
Maybe. Now, I got some information from Scott. I haven't looked through it yet.
Okay.
As far as importing things and file formats.
Usually there's some type of component in both LMSs that let you kind of download it in a format. Moodle and Blackboard and Moodle and maybe Canvas, they get a little tricky when they talk about their exam stuff. So that's good to know. And then what kind of questions do you normally do?
Sometimes multiple choice, sometimes my short essay.
Okay.
Mainly.
Okay. All right, cool. Thank you very much. Okay, so I usually go over what's the difference between quizzes, tests, and surveys. So the first thing I usually tell some people is that it's called the test tool in Blackboard. But people call assessments, quizzes, tests, midterms, finals. It's all using the test tool. And so it really is whatever language you're using, if it's called like mini pop quizzes or term and definition or quick reflection, pre and post tests, it's all going to use the test tool in Blackboard, and it all works exactly the same. What you call it, what you call the actual tests each time, that's up to you in terms of your language, but it's using the test tool. And so it allows you to create kind of multiple format assessments, both graded and ungraded. And like the traditional classrooms, the assessments are based on, you know, the need that you have for your students. The one thing I do like to point out with both quizzes and tests as well as surveys is that quizzes and tests in Blackboard function more like a traditional classroom quiz where you have a series of questions. You can do one at a time or you can do all at once, but the students take the exam and then submit it to you for review. It is not like an internet quiz where as you answer it, an answer feedback pops back at you. So it's not an interactive quizzing tool, which a lot of people see online, or some schools will pay for like a very specific piece of software that allows for kind of quick pace testing or kind of pop quizzing. It's more like it acts more like a traditional, I'm going to sit down and take an exam, I'm going to complete it, I'm going to submit it, and then my faculty member is going to review it or automatically get a grade. So I do like to make that clarification because some people are more familiar with internet testing or like testing on a website for like, you know, like 10 things you should know about your health, kind of stuff like that. That's not how, it's not that interactive. The difference between the test tool and the survey functionality is going to be that you have anonymous feedback in a survey. And this is specifically important for faculty because when you do a survey, that also means that you don't know who answered what. It will track who took the survey, but it won't attach any identifying information to that student. So it'll say that student completed it or didn't complete it, but it won't tie any data to it. So sometimes people want surveys so that they can like do a, I want to do a survey of my students of demographics and I want to know about them. You'd be better off using the test tool and generating that information than the survey tool, because the survey tool is really meant to be anonymous like a true survey is. So like you could do a midterm survey just to get a sense of what the students are looking for in the class, or in this case, a course navigation survey for you to determine the course strengths and areas of improvement that you want to have that's not related to any kind of campus formal evaluation pieces to it. It allows students to give feedback and insight without having to feel like there's going to be any type of grade retribution. So a little bit less, there's hopefully less bias in that perspective. So you don't get any information about the participants. So I usually strongly encourage people to be aware of when they're using the survey and when they're using the test tool. And the reason why is we've already had a couple people create surveys thinking that they'd get all this data from their students, and that's not necessarily how this survey that's not how the survey tool works in Blackboard. So I do like to just point that out, that they're really more for anonymous feedback, whereas tests allow you a large gamut of information about the question types, the students, the times, all that stuff as well. Moving down further, considerations when developing questions. What I normally tell people, these are kind of like there's the developing questions period, there's the creating questions, and then there's the creating the test, quiz, and survey. Now, for many of you, you have you've created quizzes and tests on campus. And so I usually just say the earlier part is just kind of a reminder or refresher about creating good questions. You know, remember to align your questions with unit and course objectives. If you're making questions that aren't related to specific areas of the textbook, make sure that your questions are clear and concise, that there's not a lot of room for interpretation. Consider brushing up on your assessment question skills. I think usually I can copy this. Let me cancel that. I just wanted to copy that. This is a writing good multiple choice questions. I put that in the chat for you from Vanderbilt. So it's just as a good kind of remind yourself, you know, how to improve on questions. Consider multiple answer rather than multiple choice. This is probably the biggest thing from an online assessment to a class, face-to-face class. Blackboard doesn't care of the order that your questions are like in or where the sequence is. If you tell them that the answer to what color is the sky is blue, it doesn't matter if that question is number 1 or number 6, or if the answer is A, B, or C. Blackboard's going to know that the answer to the question is blue. And so what I normally tell people is traditionally in a face-to-face classroom, you get this question type that says it's A, B, C, A and B, C and D, B and whatever. That question type and the way you structure that isn't necessary, because there's actually a thing called multiple answer. So there's multiple choice, which allows for one answer, and then there's multiple answer, which just allows the students to check as many boxes that apply. And so I usually just say that when people want to do that kind of old school A and B, C and D question, you would use a multiple answer question, and your last statement on that question is check all that apply. Or on all your questions, check all that apply. That might have that. But there actually is a tool that doesn't, that eliminates the need to do that A and B and C and D thing. And I think a lot of times that kind of messes up faculty when they're trying to keep track of that, because Blackboard can just know which one's A and which one's B, it kind of thing. Avoid using negatives in questions. This is actually, when I was doing research originally years ago, one of the most common issues in question writing is negating the actual question that you're asking. It's like a larger statistical kind of thing. So it was actually, that's one thing I just always like to bring up, is that sometimes writing a question in the negative causes more confusion, and you're more likely to get incorrect answers from students on interpretation, not necessarily on that they don't know the content. Think about mixing up your question types. The one thing you're going to learn very shortly is, and I always forget the number because it changed years ago, there's 15 question types in Blackboard. So it's not just multiple choice and true false. It's a whole series of them. And I'm going to show you an example in a moment of the most common question types that get used. And so you'd be able to mix some things up according to how you would like to mix it up. But traditionally, most people, especially here on the STIC campus, stick with multiple choice, true, false, matching, and essay. So those are the ones that I've most frequently seen. But there are a couple that I really like to incorporate that I think are really good for a variety of reasons. When you're moving on to creating questions, there are two ways to create quiz questions. The first one is to manually create questions one by one. And there's actually three ways. One way is to manually create the questions one by one. And I have said many times, as a person who has to in other parts of my life and in other jobs, I have had to, my job has just been to make classes. I get a course map and I get all this material, and I'm the person responsible for actually building the class. What I normally tell people is that if I have everything, it's actually easier for me sometimes to just manually make a quiz, making the questions one at a time, because my act of checking the question, making sure I'm writing everything, happens at the same time. If I do an upload, I am supposed to go back into Blackboard and look at every question and make sure everything is answered right and go into every question. So for me, I find it more efficient to write my question and then make sure that I put the right answers in there and then just take the quiz as from the student preview. I find that to be faster for me. Like I said, for me. So, but I just throw that suggestion out that that's why I usually sometimes encourage people, especially if you're only doing like 5 question, 10 question quizzes, the upload process can be longer than it would take to just build the 5 questions that you have. The second one that's listed here is to use what's called the Blackboard upload process, which is an Excel-based spreadsheet which has a formula to it where for all the question types, you would just fill out rows in a spreadsheet, and that would allow you to just upload that spreadsheet into Blackboard, and it would turn your entire, it could just create a quiz. You'd have to still do the settings, check the answers, all that stuff as well, but there is a way to manually generate questions for Blackboard using an Excel document. If that is something that interests you, not only will I talk to you about it, but I will send you that information as well. Unfortunately, most faculty build their questions on Microsoft Word. And so this is why I haven't really pushed this particular feature, because unless you're building new quizzes from scratch, you'd have to cut and paste everything from Word into an Excel document. And so some people, I again, think about effectiveness and efficiency on this. The third way is going to be, and it went around and it didn't generate from the Center for Online and Digital Learning. That is actually to use a test generator from the web. That means you look up test generator in Blackboard and you go to a site and you upload your questions and they turn them into text files that you then upload into Blackboard. And I can find that information out for you. It was very popular, I will say, back in 2006, 2008 when I used it. The one reason that I have kind of gone away from that is mostly because I'm not 100% sure the sources of those test generators. I had IT check it out and they said that it was safe, so you can always feel free to use it. But I remember when I first started doing this, there were 10 different schools that had 10 different test generators. And now the one test generator that went around on the STIC campus from another school, that's the only one out there. So it's also fallen out of favor, and also that it's the only one. So I don't tend to rely on a place where I only have one site at a school that I can't even find the page for their Blackboard information. So I'm not even sure they use Blackboard. So that website could go down anytime. So there is a third way, and while it's still available, feel free to use it. But that's the only reason that I haven't really pushed it, is that we went from 10 sites and different schools with different generators to now one school that I can only find one that really works effectively. Some people have test generators at schools that when you upload it, the questions never quite upload correctly. And a lot of those schools took those down. They got old or they didn't get updated or whatever the case might be. But that particular piece of software or program to write, I guess, isn't very complicated. So it just mostly needed to be updated as Blackboard got updated. So those are the 3 ways to create questions: manually, cut and paste from a document you already have, this upload process, or to find the test generator that's available. The other way to get questions is your textbook company or an existing exam bank of some form. And that's usually that even if you're not sure you have a test bank available, usually what will happen is you can write to anybody and just ask. You just ask if they happen to have a test bank for Blackboard, and sometimes they don't promote it, but they do have one available. The next thing usually is creating tests, quizzes, and surveys. This is my advice that I usually find helps with a lot of technical support and headaches. Take the tests yourself. Don't rely on just putting them into Blackboard and then accepting all is good. Read through the questions and make sure the questions align with the answers. Sometimes you accidentally click the wrong button. Sometimes you didn't realize that the question doesn't make sense as you're sitting there taking the test yourself. Look at what works and what doesn't when you might be taking a quiz. There might be hangups for students. Sometimes it's the sequence of the questions. Sometimes it's does flipping to a new question each time or having the quiz down the page. You can determine what you think might hang up your students. For quite some time, for years, what I generally recommended when creating tests was to do tests straight down the page. The main reason why is that I worked at UMass with in health sciences, and a lot of their students actually were in the rural, like the farm towns closer into the other side of Western Mass. And they were still using dial-up. And even to this day, they're still using satellite and dial-up in some places. Having to load question by question by question took longer. And so having the page load once and having the students take the quiz caused a lot less issues with internet connectivity. So if you know your students, that's another thing to help. Ask a friend or colleague to take the test. If you've been living with the material so long, you might not catch typos or sentence structure issues. Again, you're not asking someone to necessarily question your quizzes. You're just asking them to see flow, seeing if there's anything you haven't caught. If you also have a colleague, I think one of the best things I ever saw was I had a handful of faculty who made like 400 question banks together. And so they helped prevent cheating by writing questions for each other. So yes, there were 400 questions, but they could do these really great randomizing quizzes where students never, out of a bank of 100, a bank out of 200 questions, they could easily not get the same quiz from student to student to student. And so it just took the load off of people when 4 faculty members had to build 10 new questions every semester versus, 50 questions a semester kind of thing. So that's what I usually also say is utilize colleagues. All right, I'm going to stop on that one because I know that that's a lot. Okay. The next thing that I like to talk about, and I do this mostly because Blackboard does this in a lot of their training videos, and I think it is kind of helpful. But there's actually how to develop tests in Blackboard specifically. And I usually my analogy to this is if you were wrapping a present. You got a present for somebody and you need to wrap it. So there are 6 basic steps in creating quizzes, and this is the life cycle of a quiz. You're going to determine the question types that you want to use. Then you're actually going to create the test itself. Just create the test. Then you're going to create the questions for the test, or you have the questions on a piece of paper and you're going to create them in Blackboard. Then you're going to choose how the question is going to be set up to the students, how long they have, the duration, the time, that kind of thing. Then you're going to determine when it goes live, because you can hold back a test or a quiz at any time, and so it never gets seen. And then the last step is managing the test. That's actually the grading part, looking at the data, that kind of stuff. If I think of the analogy as wrapping kind of a quiz, what I would do is I determine the question types by getting the present. I'm going to go, what kind of present do I want to get someone? Then I'm going to create the test, and the test is the box I'm going to put the present in. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create questions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to shove a bunch of stuff inside of it. I'm going to make sure it's all set, and I'm going to kind of prep that. Then if I want to go ahead and do the test settings are just actually wrapping it. I'm wrapping it up. I'm sealing it with what I want it to kind of look like and organize and all of that stuff. And so I put the bow, I put the ribbon on it, and then I go ahead and I give the present away to the students, and I technically give the present away, present equaling test, and then the students unwrap it, and it's kind of like you manage the process of them getting excited about, taking out the present and getting rid of all the paper and doing all that stuff. So all the random stuff that happens with that. And so I always just tell people it's the same thing of like wrapping a present. There's steps to it. So there's steps to creating a test in Blackboard. Once you get the sense of it, it doesn't take that long. Question types. So this one is where I go into that, and I always say this, there's 15 or 17. I never can remember the total number. As many times as I do this workshop, I always say it's 15, and then sometimes I'm wrong. I separate question types out into most frequently used and additional question types that don't get used that often. And I always say that I am not a math person. And so math people, please feel free to help me make questions up or answer things or go over the question type with me, because I just always struggle with the math piece. I admit my shortcomings. So frequently used are going to be multiple choice and multiple answer, true, false, and either or. True, false, and either or, it's a weird thing here. True, false is literally a quiz question that asks for true, false. Either or is a question type that allows you to do either or, yes, no, agree, disagree, and true, false. So it gives you more options if your question you're asking doesn't have a simple true, false, if it has a yes, no kind of thing like that. Matching, which is going to be term and definition or pairing. Essay, which allows you to write long format essays, like at the end of the quiz, or anything that has longer pieces to it. And then fill in the blank. Fill in the blank is really good because what it does is you provide the answers to the students, and then the students have to know both spelling, capitalization, and where it goes in what sequence. So I'll show you an example of a fill in the blank, but we'll talk about that a little bit more. Additional question types are going to be calculated formula and calculated numeric. One actually has creates formulas, and then the students fill those in. Numeric is where they actually are doing math and completing and entering math into it. File response is if you have a quiz, but you want them to turn in a Word document, an image, anything like that, it actually has an upload button and just lets the students upload it. My example would be, and I had this at UMass for turf management, is they'd send students out to go take pictures of various stadiums and spaces where they would be taking pictures of the landscaping of the area. And so people would be taking pictures for their exam to demonstrate the question. And so they would just upload pictures after they had done their project to this exam area, and then they'd have to answer questions and explain stuff. Hotspot. Hotspot is a very cool one, but it's also the only one that is not accessibility friendly. Hotspot lets you put a picture up in Blackboard. You tell Blackboard what quadrant of the picture you're looking for the students to click on. And when the students get the picture, they're going to click on it, and then that tells them the right answer or wrong answer. So say you're doing the cardiac cycle and you want to talk about systole versus diastole. I'm not sure if I ever say that right, but you'd have to go ahead and click on like where the flow of blood is going, and the student would go ahead and click on the picture based on the question that you asked. Then jumbled sentence. Jumbled sentence is literally the question jumbles the sentence up, and the students have like a pull down menu where they have to kind of select the right sequence. So this would be good for formulas. This would be in formulas in terms of like this step goes to this step, goes to this step, or procedures. Additionally, quotes, things like that as well. I always say Shakespeare quotes where the student has to fill that in. Opinion or Likert scale, or Likert scale, that's how it's supposed to be really said. An opinion or Likert scale is really used mostly for surveys, but it does allow you to have kind of a 0 to 5 kind of sequence for you to be able to kind of fill that in and have students kind of give a perspective. Ordering is the order. I think my example has always been list the presidents in order, and the students have to get the list of presidents and they have to put them in sequential order. Quiz bowl. Quiz bowl is Jeopardy. It has to be answered in the form of a question, so that students they get a response given to them, and then they have to ask it in the form of a question. And then short answer. Short answer is just simply the equal to essay, but it's more of a short format type of thing. So those are all the kind of question types and kind of thinking through the different options. And very shortly, I'll actually go over the most frequently asked questions in Blackboard, so you'll kind of see that. What I do want to ask you right now is what questions interest you? from what you just saw. So I'll cover the ones that you mentioned, but do any of these other ones kind of interest you in any way you'd like to see?
Well, I said short answer, but is that different? That would be different than the essay, because short answer, you know, few sentences, versus essay has to be this huge long thing.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And then I also have used matching.
Okay. All right, I'll add that one to the list. Ed, do you have a particular one that I mentioned that you might want to look at?
No, most of the ones on the left I've used.
Okay. Okay. So let me, so let's build a quiz. That's the next thing that I usually have. And what I want to do is open up Blackboard. So get my schedule out of here and open Blackboard up. Share. Stop sharing. I want a new share and I want to share Blackboard. Okay. Now, what I traditionally have done is I just go over a quiz that I've already made just to show you an example really quick, and then we can go ahead and kind of build something out if you have any questions as we go. So in my normal student learning workshops here, I'm going to pretend to be a student for a second. And so this is my faux class that I do workshops in. I'm going to go ahead and come to student preview, and I'm going to take this quiz as if I was a student. Also, just so you can see the process of taking a quiz. I'm going to actually come down here to exams and quizzes on my my course menu, and I have here a series of different examples. I'm going to go ahead and have what's my sample test, and it has my examples in here. So when a student goes to take a test, what will happen is that they come to a window. Now, remember when I said you had all the stuff you needed to throw in, and then you had the wrapping? The wrapping is the settings. When you set up a quiz, this window is going to be based on each individual quiz that you set up in its settings. So it's giving information to the students based on what I told Blackboard I wanted this quiz, test, survey, pop quiz to be. It's a 1-hour test, and it will be saved and submitted when the time expires. That's a feature that allows me to go ahead and automatically have the test submitted. It doesn't run over, it just submits it. I also don't allow for forced completion, which means that if the student leaves the screen for any reason, the test will automatically save, and then the student no longer has another attempt. I don't allow for that. I'll explain why, my thoughts on why I don't. Multiple attempts. In this case, I use this exam or test quite often, and I want to be able to keep using it. So I do multiple attempts. I allow the students to take as many as they want, just because I want to take this quiz as many times as I'm displaying it to faculty. But you can choose just one attempt if that's what you want. I also have a due date on here that once that due date clicks in, depending on my other settings, it will either not allow the students to come back in here, or it will let students take the exam after the due date, but it will mark it late, and I can do any type of penalty or any grade adjustment as needed. I'm going to go ahead and just click. If I'm not ready, I can go ahead and cancel, but I can go ahead and begin my exam. Now, I've allowed for multiple attempts. When a student has taken the exam multiple times, they get a window here that allows them to have multiple submissions, so that I can go back to the course and not take another attempt. I can view all my attempts that I've taken, or I can start a new submission. If I want to go ahead and start a new submission, I just click on this. If I'm only allowed one attempt, I'm just going to be taken to this screen to start. I don't see that overlay that lets me see my previous submissions. I'm going to get my test information that I just saw previously again, so the students see it twice. And then I'm going to get a little box here that not only includes a timer, it's going to include a completion status here. Now, what I will tell you is that students with test anxieties, and this has already been a question asked here multiple times during my tenure at STIC, is that the students can collapse these windows at any time. So if a student has severe test anxiety and says, oh my God, I want to get rid of the timer, or you feel that that's just something your students experience, you can tell them that they can collapse this window and not see the timer, or see it whenever they want to. But that's up to them. I have chosen this particular question type to be displayed straight down the page, but you can again do it so that it's one at a time. And in this example, it's going to do what I call randomizing the questions. So Blackboard, especially for multiple choice questions, allows you to, let me start over again. From in Blackboard, you can let the quiz questions be displayed in random order, which means in a 10 question quiz, I can ask it to randomize the sequence in which the students get it. So if two students are sitting next to each other, roommates, friends, whatever, and they want to take their exam together, I can set up the quiz that allows it so that question 1 for student A and question 1 for student B are not the same question. So they can't sit there and go really quickly 1A, 2B, that kind of thing, because they'd have to search up and down the page, or they'd have to keep fumbling through the quiz. The other thing is that with multiple choice questions, you can randomize the actual answer order, because once Blackboard knows that the answer to what color is the sky is blue, it doesn't matter where Blackboard puts the answer, if it's 1A, B, C, D, 1, 2, 3, kind of thing like that. So I just like to say that to people just so they get a sense that in this particular quiz I've set up, the questions are always displayed to me as a student in a different sequence. So because most people put essays at the bottom, and in this case, my essay always shows up in random places. Now, first thing to know is that question 1 is going to be your yes, no, true, false, what we call the either or question type. And I will tell you this, is that I made this quiz up to be wrong in places because I wanted to point out common issues people have with building and developing quizzes, regardless if it's face-to-face or online. So I took some of the challenges that people come up with. So this is not a perfect quiz. What I did want to show people is that you can also use a quiz to be a learning activity instead of just a completely assessment-based tool or quiz tool. This particular question type is the yes, no, either or, true, false. But what I did is I actually did a little tutorial to explain what the question type was. And then I had, based on the information of the above based on the information above answer, the following statement. Sorry, that's a weird question I actually wrote. When creating an either or question, you have four answer options. So if I provided a statement to the students, and I wanted to give them kind of an educational, like little snippet of information, the student could just say, based on this, I'm answering the question, yes, the statement is correct. So I do have the ability to, put things in here that are like, I'm explaining something to you, do you get it? Yes, no. Additionally, if you're going to do something like a syllabus quiz, I usually encourage people to do a yes, no question that says, I have read the syllabus and I have completed the orientation and this survey to the best of my knowledge, yes, no. So that's kind of the way you can kind of ask students, if they're doing outside of like assessment-based quizzes, you can use this question type. So that's the either or. The essay question is going to have an area where you can write an essay in, and then the students just type the essay in. What will happen is that this will automatically hold this question for you to grade yourself, but it will grade all other parts of the quiz and hang out waiting for you to grade it from the faculty perspective. I'm going to come back to question 1 just before I forget, and I'm going to go ahead and answer yes. If I answer yes, I can go ahead and click on save in the upper right-hand side. But if I wait 5 seconds, it will automatically, it's between 5 and 10 seconds, it will automatically save the question for me. So students, if they forget to hit that button, it will automatically do it for them. If they change their answer, it will go back to save answer and I can click it again, or within a few seconds, it will save again. So I do have the option to go back and change my answers, but I also have the ability to save at any point. Again, if I come to the completion status, I'll get a little indication here that I've completed my question 1. I've answered question 1. I have my essay here, and I'm just going to go ahead and type an answer for my essay question in the text content editor. Okay, and it saved it for me. Then what I wanted to do was show you that this is a multiple choice question. Now, multiple choice questions look different from multiple answers solely by the radial button, the circle, or by the square. A circle in web-based materials is indicating that a circle only allows for one answer. A square allows for multiple answers. It's a checkbox. So it lets you check all that apply. So right here, I have a multiple choice question. That's how you can easily identify it. But this particular multiple choice question, I inserted an image. So I can take a picture of anything and then ask the students to identify a particular part of the screen. I can ask them to tell me something in the sequence. I can ask them what stage of something they're at, what part it is. So I have the ability to do that as well. It's going to automatically save it. And I'm just going to go ahead and put an answer in there. Then my other question here, this is just going to be true, false. And this one is the executive and legislative branch are the two branches that form the government of the United States. Two things come out of this that I always like to point out is that sometimes people will say, yes, those are two branches of the US government, but that's not the question that was asked. And so the question is this a very tricky question, or is this just a poorly written question? Or is it the students have to just slow down and write it? Because these are two branches of the US government, but the question says, are the two branches that form the government of the United States? That's the first part. Second part is that occasionally, just to be aware, given a cultural, geographic background, sometimes people will write questions of who is the president of what? So just also remember that sometimes you have to give a larger context if you're asking something that needs to be specific to a particular discipline. Sometimes the same terminology gets used in health fields, but then is it ear, nose, throat? What is it you're asking for specifically? You want to make sure that you do that. And in online, students, for some reason, really narrow in on those. So student would go ahead and answer this one, and I'm just going to say true, and then I would click on save answer or would do it for me. Again here, what planets are closest to the sun? This is a multiple answer question. Whenever I do this one, I made the joke of saying, well, I just assumed everyone would assume that they might just answer, you know, the ones closest to the sun. But then one faculty member said, what universe are we talking about? So question is interpretive. And so as usual, I'm just going to go ahead and answer a bunch of these just to show you that a multiple answer question would be. So again, think about your question type and what is it in context, and then go ahead and click on save. Question 6 in this particular essay is going to be the fill in the blank. So in this case, the statement says all that blanked is not gold. Now, usually I just pause and ask everybody to ask me, and then I always tell people you can kind of tell an age group because there's a certain group of people who don't know this answer. But why I want to point this out is that the answer is glitters. And if I go ahead and put in glitters, or I put in glitter, the system is going to say that this is wrong. And the reason why is that it is a sentence. You should not capitalize the G, and the actual word is glitters. So you can be very specific, and I really like this for term and definition kind of things, but I say this because I've worked with a lot of health people. This is really helpful when you want the student to spell correctly and know when to capitalize and when not to capitalize certain terms. So I really do like the fill in the blank question when you need people to have a very specific understanding of specific terms as well. So I might make a lot of term and definition fill in the blanks. You can also change it so that if I did accept glitter and glitters, I can also put alternates. So if I accepted H2O and water, I would be able to accept either H2O and water as an answer. So in this case, that's just to kind of let you know, I'm going to go ahead and make this correct and just say all that glitters. So that's just to let you know you can be that specific. You're going to provide that answer to Blackboard as the system. The next one is going to be matching, and matching is this particular one. I set it up incorrectly, so I will tell people that, and I always forget to fix it. But what you're going to do is have one column that has term, one column that has definition, one column that has pair to pair. In this case, I wanted to show sequence here and match the following. And so what I wanted to do was just point out that in some cases, like I had two of the same one, this was going to be a confusing question because there can only be one right pair for it. And if the student answers C for this one and B for this one, but it's actually B and C, then that student would still get it wrong. So I do like to point out that you want to just make sure your matches can't be easily confused. And I made a really obvious one on this one. What I made a mistake is that I actually set this quiz up to not be, this particular type to not be randomized. So it always shows it in this sequence to the students, which is the pairs match across the board. There's actually a button that you push to actually make the whole thing randomize the order. So in my case, I accidentally made this a very static question. That was my bad. So this is just to let you know that's how you would do it, and the student would go sequenced overall. Then the last one is going to be, who was the third president of the United States? This is just your straight on, non-graph, non-pictured based multiple choice question. And I always go ahead and for some reason I always, and I said this, I actually typed in Adama. I guess I had Battlestar Galactica on my head, but it's actually Adams. And so I just go ahead and I can select any answer that I want to do. It will only let me choose one. So I'm going to go ahead and choose John Quincy Adams, but it's supposed to be Adama. It's supposed to be Adams and it says Adama. Anyways, so I'm selecting all of those. I'm done with my quiz as a student. I can click on save all answers just to make sure, but hypothetically say that I don't answer a question. So say I went ahead and I did not, it says it's unanswered, okay. Say I went to go ahead and save it. It's going to give me a little pop-up, and I'm not sure if the pop-up shows up for you. Is there a pop-up showing? There's a little white box. Okay, that's because I'm just showing this particular window. Let me just do this quickly for 1 second. Boop. You're going to see a box up at the top of your quiz that says the following questions may be incomplete. I want to just point out when students are taking quizzes, they get a series of things giving them hiccups that say you didn't complete it, you submitted, that kind of thing. I'm going to go ahead and say, okay, and I submitted it without answering it. So that's one of the things to just let you know that the student would automatically be able to do that. I set up this quiz so that the student gets a window that tells me that my test has been submitted. It tells me my start date. It tells me how long, when I submitted it, that it's late. It tells me my due date, and then it tells me how much time out of the total time that I had. Now, if I set this quiz up, I have the ability to show the students feedback that's auto-generated from my own purpose for the settings. So I'm going to go ahead and it says click OK to view results. If I click OK here, I've allowed the students to see the questions again and then see just feedback that I've written up for it. It's not telling them exactly what they got right. It's not telling them what they got wrong. It's not saying you got A wrong or B wrong or whatever. It's just saying this question you didn't get right. It's telling me that this is the question that I asked. It's telling me the feedback that says that this question is not correct and answered. You have the ability to provide layered feedback of correct answer, all answers, all of that stuff. And I'll throw that to you in a second. So you do have the ability to show students nothing or show students various kind of feedback to this. So in this case, it's just showing me the questions. And if I had feedback, it's showing me feedback. So this is not the correct answer. Please review the list of presidents to determine it. So students could click on this and then they could go ahead and see that Thomas Jefferson was the third president of the United States and John Adams was the second. So I can, if this was a quiz where I just wanted to provide feedback to the students, that would be what this would do. I'm going to go ahead and share my Blackboard screen again. So we're back in a little bit. That might be a little bit more helpful to see. So that's how a student would take a quiz, and that's kind of how the format of the quizzing works. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to exit out of that, and I'm going to go, and I always tell people I take my student hat off and I put my faculty hat back on. And as a faculty member, what will happen is that when I want to see my students taking quizzes or tests, I'm going to be in my edit mode on. I'm going to come to my course menu. I'm going to come down further past the course menu into course management under the control panel, and I'm going to click on Grade Center. I have two areas three areas specifically where I can see this particular quiz. I can see it under needs grading because I can see that the student has a submission that's going to be ready. I can see it under the full grade center where the column is located. And then I can also see it if I have a shortcut link to it under the tests area, which is just showing me all my tests in the grade center. I'm going to go ahead and just click on my full grade center here. And when I click on my full grade center, I'm going to come over here, and I always have to take a look and find out. I have to remind myself where my test is. Oh, it's someplace over here. Submit grade, weighted to total, test. And it's good if you know actually what your test is actually called before you do this. Sample test, And let me go ahead and try to find it. Oh, here we go. So sample test. This is telling me that I have a test waiting, and if you take my Grade Center workshop, you'll know how to do the color coding. I was like, Karen already did this. So this is actually giving me an indicator to let me know that I have a test waiting for me to grade. When I want to see the item that needs to be graded, which is also followed up with a exclamation point, I'm going to go ahead and I see all of the submissions that that student provided. And I'm going to go ahead and click on it. And then here I'm seeing all of my attempts, and I can also see all of the history of all of the attempts. So I can see 1, 2, and 3 here. When I come in here, I'm going to see this particular, I'm going to see the either or question. This is going to tell me that I answered it wrong. It's going to provide me the answer for the essay. This is how I would grade my essay. I would come in here, I'd look at the thing, I'd go, okay, let's see here. Did I get, oh, I think I'm choosing the wrong, I want attempt 3. So attempt 3, I had my essay and I put in here, type an answer for the essay question in the content box. And so if the correct answer was, this is a sample response to be used as a guide, then I would be incorrect. And then what I could do is I could go ahead and grade this one. So it says it needs grading, and I want to actually grade this one. And there we go. Hi. Oh, I didn't mean to click that button. Attempt 3. Here is my essay, and I can just come in here and I would say, well, they answered it, so I'm going to give them a 2 out of 10. Now, it's set up to not give the student the grade until I've graded it. And so once I hit this, it's going to give the grade to the student because the essay was the only thing outstanding for it. So it's going to automatically grade it once I hit the save next. So I can go through and I can alter the grades at any point. It also allows me to regrade. It also lets me see, an access log, which tells me, and this is a very cool thing, it tells me second by second how they answered the question and how long they spent on it. If you have a question about 2 students cheating, you can pull up the access log and you can compare their answers to when they did. So if you do think 2 students were taking the same, sometimes, to be honest with you, I have actually seen 2 students take an exam about the same time and not be cheating. They just accidentally happened to have a window approximately the same, but they were answering different questions, or like they were doing randomized questions, and so they weren't the same. Or they were in sequence and they answered the same. So like if you didn't choose randomized order, they were answering them all. But more often than not, that this is the case where you're going to see that these are identical almost by the same seconds. So the access log is kind of really helpful for faculty to be able to determine that if you have an inkling that that's the case. I'm going to go ahead and just click on save and hit next. And now that automatically provided a grade and removed attempt 2. So attempt 2 and 1 were waiting for a grade. Attempt 3 I've now officially graded. And if I go back here into my grade center, you'll see here that there's a 32 assigned to that student. And then I still have other attempts to grade, but that's just populating that. My student can come back in here and at any point go to the My Grades area, and what they will see here is they'll see a 32 that's assigned to them automatically. And they'll see that if they click on, let me go back, sorry, I did that too fast. If you have multiple attempts allowed, anytime they click on the title, once they've activated an exam, a paper, the link will turn from black or whatever color the link is, but it'll turn from unresponsive to a responsive hyperlink. It will actually give them information about their test. So in this case, they know that they're still waiting for 2 to be graded, but this one at 32, this one was automatically graded for them. So it gives them some feedback. All right, so that's how kind of you give out the test looks like that, the students take the test, and that's kind of like the test cycle, that's kind of how it looks. Now to actually create a test, that's the pause that I'm gonna do here. There's 2 ways to create exams, and I generally, over spring break when I gave that workshop, I just encourage people to come here to the exams area and go ahead and come under assessments and create a test right here. It automatically created the test in the test area and students could take it. Now there is another place where you can create tests, and what that does is it just prevents the test from possibly ever being seen by students. So you can start to it's kind of the repository of where all the tests lie. I just generally, when I'm building a quiz out, I put it under my tests area, so I automatically have it here. But your tests have a space where they're located under course management where students can't ever possibly see. And I do want to go ahead and point that out now. Over spring break, I knew that was going to confuse some people. Under test tools, you can come all the way down to the bottom where it says test surveys and pools, and you're going to be taken to a link that says test surveys and pools. Tests are going to be where you create tests, surveys are where you're going to create surveys, and pools are going to be pool question types that you can start to generate a bunch of pools of questions that you can then pull into tests and surveys. I'm going to go ahead and I want to click on tests, and here I can go ahead and either import a test from another Blackboard class or from another location. I can also just build a test straight out of the way, but this is where all of my tests are located. Now, remember when I said you would deploy a test and you would give it out to the students? You can hold on to a test and never have it available to students, and that's why it's sitting here saying deployed no. But if you want to know where you've put your test, you can see that under the tests area that I've deployed it under what learning module, under what feature. And since I always put mine under exams and quizzes, it goes ahead and it'll tell me that all of these tests are, but these particular ones, learning takeaway for today, sample, test example, these are not anywhere in my class. I'm secure in the knowledge that students can't accidentally take this quiz or that it's just lingering out there in the system. I'm going to go ahead and click on build test though, because I want to just go ahead and show you this here. Whether you build test here or you build it in exams and quizzes, once you get to this window, it is identical, all of the steps. There's only one extra step if you're building it in the test area versus building it in the exams and quizzes area. I have test information. This is the first thing. So this is basically, I'm creating the box. When I create the box for my quiz, I'm going to go ahead and say that this is week 1, chapter 1 quiz. Description and instructions. There's really kind of no right or wrong thing for this. It's interpretation. I usually say that description is when you want to say something like this covers chapter 1 and the supplemental materials. So I'm giving a description of what it is, and then my instructions might be follow the instructions listed on the main quiz page, or the main quiz instructions. If I had any additional instructions that I needed to provide, I could put them there. You also don't have to put anything here at all. I often don't. I just leave this as the box that I'm creating the quiz for, and I just have the quiz link be the thing the students don't get any extra information. They just click on the link and they go to that box that has those instructions. But I can put anything here if I want to. I'm then going to go ahead and click on the word submit. This has now created my box, and now I can create questions. I can reuse questions from a previous quiz that I have elsewhere in Blackboard, or I can do what's called create a question set or create a random block. Now, I traditionally do a question set, and a question set is going to allow me to put 10 questions into a section and then only use 4 of them. And so it will randomize what 4 out of the 10 students get. So I have the ability to find ones that I've already used, and then I have an ability to do a question set or a random block. A random block is part of that tools feature, and you have to set that up earlier on. And that's one of the features I can't talk about with the amount of time we have today, but you basically would create a random block of questions that would stand alone. But if you're just looking to pull a bunch of questions and only use a certain number of them so that no students get the same, like they all get 4 questions, but they all get 4 different questions out of say 10 or 20, I usually use a question set for that. So that's what a question set is. I also can upload questions, and this is where if I am using my Excel document from Blackboard or I'm using my test generator from a website, I would be able to use my upload questions feature. The import test piece is usually when you have a more formalized something from a test bank or from another LMS. So this window is for when you're using those Excel spreadsheet kind of things or the Word spreadsheet things, but the previous screen where it said upload a test, that's gonna be where you're actually using an actual file from an LMS or from a test bank. I also have the ability to create the questions. So for example, just so that we kind of go through the process, I'm going to create just a couple questions for people. And I'm just going to show you. So here you have I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to choose the most popular one, which is going to be multiple choice. I'm going to go ahead and click on the button that says multiple choice after I click on create question. I'm going to be asked a title. The title is for identification only. This is not displayed to the student. If you want the answer to be the question title, feel free. Students never see this. So for example, if I did want something to be like what tool, so tool for quizzes. I want to say that tool for quizzes in Blackboard. So that's my identifying thing that reminds me about the question title. And then this is where my question actually gets typed into. Now you get the text editor. So if you wanted to make a more robust question that had hyperlinks, insert a video, if you wanted to do your own tutorial video kind of thing, or have the students look at a part that you do, or if say there was some type of piece of equipment you wanted to go over and the students had to identify something from a particular, like at this point, name this feature. And you paused and said, now answer the question, you could insert video into it so you could make it more interactive. But for this particular moment, I'm gonna go ahead and just click on, and put the question in. So my question is gonna be, what tool in Blackboard Learn allows me to create a quiz. And I'm going to say this, an on-screen interactive quiz. So I'm going to be a little bit more specific, knowing that some people use the assignment tool. And I'm going to come to options. And that's the first thing you're going to do. With all quiz types, it's going to ask what options you want. How do I want my ordering sequence? Do I want it to have letters or numerals or numbers? I choose no. I just allow the radio buttons and checkboxes. I just leave that as that is. Do I want it to go vertical or horizontal? I was given advice from an accessibility specialist once that said that actually, depending on how the screen is projected for screen readers, as well as for people reading right to left, that it's actually better to have your responses vertical, even though a lot of people kind of do this horizontal thing, is that if you go past a certain number, it wraps around and goes below. And as you shorten and expand your window, it doesn't always adjust. So I was always just advised that to use vertical responses. And that's just advice that I got. But if you want to use horizontal, you can. I always tell people I select vertical. Partial credit, if you want to give partial credit to a particular item, when you do that, it's going to ask you, do you want to allow negative scores for incorrect answers? So that's going to be an option for you for this particular question. If you're going to allow partial credit, if they answer, say, one is kind of right, kind of thing like that, you have to determine that. I'm going to unselect that one. And then I'm going to go ahead and then I want to show the answers in random order. If I don't set up this question to do in random order, it's always going to say assignment, quiz, journal, blog. It's always going to give that sequence. If I choose random order, it'll be any of those four mixed up as much as I want it, as much as the system will mix up the four responses. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and since I'm choosing random order, I'm just going to let my first answer be the correct answer. And I'm just going to type in here test tool. Now, if I wasn't choosing random order, I would want to randomize the correct answer and put it someplace else throughout my quizzes. And that's why I often just go ahead and let random answers happen so that I don't have to sit there and think, how many times did I use C? How many times did I use B? That kind of thing. It's only when you want to have it in a sequence or that's your particular, just be aware that if you put correct answer here for A, then your entire quiz is going to say A is the correct answer or 1 is the correct answer. So you want to move that around if you're not using random order. But I am, so I'm just going to let A be my correct answer. And then 2, I would go ahead and type in this one, assignment tool. And then I'm going to keep scrolling down. One little hiccup here is there's a scroll bar in your content editor and there's a scroll bar in the test tool. So I always run into this where I'm scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. It's because I'm scrolling inside of this box. So you sometimes have to jump out and just click your mouse anywhere else to jump out. I'm then going to go ahead and say journal tool. I'm going to just keep finding the J and I'm going to type in journal tool. Yeah, Karen, you know me well enough. I try to make these funny. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and say calendar tool. Okay, so those are my 4 options. Now, one thing just to let you know, as you saw here, it said number of answers. I do not know why, but Blackboard will allow me to have up to 100 answers if I so determined it, and it would literally click on here and create me 100. So if I didn't want 100 of them, I can always go back and I would have to, and I just did it to myself, didn't I? I would have to go back and then just remove the 101 of them in order to kind of not have 100 of them. So I did that as a sarcastic thing and now I'm going to pay for it. Because once you select that, you have to delete all of them. So let's see if I can do that really fast. Is that going to let me do it? I don't know if it is. It's still thinking. Good job, Kyle. So that's what happens on a Friday. Anyways, I've got all these question types in here. See, answer 25. I should have just selected 6 and then my life would have been better. Is it gonna let me do that? Thank you. There you go. Okay. So that's just to let you know you can have as many questions. I broke it. That's a good job. Okay. Okay. Ed's never attended any workshop I've ever had. He wasn't prepared for any of this. So that would be happen. So now it's saying I only have 99 to go. Okay, good. So this would just allow me to kind of create my question here in Blackboard. So to make my life easier, I'm just going to go ahead and do something I would tell people not to do, which is just go backwards into my question. And see, it's still trying to load. Not my most brilliant moment here, Kyle. Let me scroll to the bottom and I'm just going to cancel. If it lets me, it's not going to let me. Yeah, see, it says answer 99. So yeah, you don't want to do that. That's kind of the lesson that we learned right here. So I'm going to stop this page from loading. Is it going to do it? And then can I just load it? Yeah, go ahead, do that for me. Let me see if I'm going to cause myself any other. There you go. That's what I wanted. I wanted an error. I want to go back to the test tool. Sorry about that. Come back to tests. And I'm going to see, do I have one that I did today? Did it, or just not remember my test at all? There we go. So I had week 1, chapter 1 quiz, and it's just sitting here. And if I want to edit it, I'll come back in here and I had no quiz question because I didn't save this one. So I'm just going to really quickly go in there and make this one. So anyways, yep. EB tool. So don't do that is what I'm going to say to people in the future. Not even to be funny. Okay. Anyways, what tool do you use to create an interactive quiz in Blackboard. So that was approximately like the question that I had. I'm going to go ahead again, random answer. And again, I always tell people, this is why I do this faster, is I'm going to say that this is the test tool. I'm going to go ahead and scroll down and do assignment tool. And I'm going to go ahead and say blog tool, and then I'm going to say calendar tool. And I got 4. And so that's why I say sometimes this is actually faster if I'm also writing really simple questions, questions out. Feedback. If I want students to get feedback, so they automatically know that the correct answer is going to be yes. You create an interactive test using quiz, because I said quiz. You use an interactive quiz using the test tool. And then my incorrect answer would be nope. You would use the test tool. I can give them the answer, or I can tell them where to go for the answer, but I also don't have to use feedback. What I normally tell people is most people that I work with just do quizzes without feedback to start, and then go back in and add feedback later on as they get more proficient with the test tool. Up to you. Most test generators and most of the upload features do not allow you to add the feedback feature. So feedback has to be manually put into Blackboard, which is also why I sometimes tell people not to worry about it. Categories is just if you wanted to structure these. I have a couple existing ones, and it will tell me examples, navigation, that kind of thing like that. And all I'm doing is giving me the categories so that I can sort this out and find quiz questions faster, or test questions faster. Then when I have instructor notes, I'm going to go ahead and click on that, and I have instructor notes here. And this is just to, and I usually tell people I only do this, is I just tell myself when I created this question, so that if for any reason I wanted to know how long this question's been hanging out in my test area, I can do that. If I'm making a bunch of multiple choices, I can click submit and create another one. It'll keep me in the multiple choice area. If I'm not, I can go ahead and click on submit. And now I have a multiple choice question. It's asking me what my question is. It's telling me what the right answer is. It's telling me what my feedback is. Far right-hand side of this question is also my point value. If I don't want this to be my point value, it's my automatic is 10 points that it's going to assign. And I can always change this at any point by typing in it. I can also click on extra credit if it's an extra credit question. And I can label that here. I also, if I have a lot of questions and I want to regrade them, I can always click on here and then resubmit the points and adjust the points. So if I selected all, hit 2, and did update, all questions would turn to 2 here. If I know that I tend to make all my questions 10 points, 2 points, 5 points, I can come up to this settings area and click on settings. And this will say provide feedback for individual answers. That's actually every answer would allow me a feedback box, which I don't want. I just want feedback for the whole question. It add categories. I can take that away. I can also add, students can add images files to all answers. I can do that side, that's not student. And then I can add images to individual feedback to students if I wanted to do that. But I'm pointing this one out because there's a bunch of defaults that you can set up. It'll say here default points. So if I want my default points to always be 5, I can set this up. And then all my future questions will default to 5. So I don't have to come in here and adjust my points. A lot of faculty tend to have a set of common point values, and you can always just adjust them however you need to. So say I was okay and I'm done with this actual quiz. This is where I want it to go. I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. Now this quiz is sitting nowhere in Blackboard. It's not sitting in any area whatsoever of Blackboard for me. If I want to make this available to students, what I need to do is come to the area that I want to make the quiz available. I'm going to click on that link, and I'm going to come over to where it says assessments and it says test. I'm going to click on test, and I'm going to see all the tests that aren't currently deployed in some part of Blackboard, and I'm going to look for my chapter quiz, and all I'm doing is creating the link from the test tool to my quiz and exams area. I'm going to go ahead and hit submit here. It's going to ask me, do I want to add anything else to this, this section? And I'm going to say no. Now what happens is I've made the box, I've thrown my questions into the box, I've got stuff in it. Now I need to do the settings or wrap the box. Now my test has, this is where it gets a little bit elaborate, but my test options are my settings, how I want the test to be presented out. I have my description, I have my instructions. Do I want this test to open up in a new window? Yes or no? That's an option for me. Then I have test availability. Is this test ready to go out to students right now? Yes or no? I can still hold it out or I can make it available. I'm going to go ahead and click on yes because I want it to be available, but I'm also going to be able to hold back when it gets displayed to students later on. If I'm not ready at all, I can make the link onto the exams and quizzes area, but not have it shown. I'd have to come back in here to make it available. For this purpose, I'm going to do that. If I'm doing it on the fly and I'm coming back in to make it, I can also immediately send out an announcement that tells me that the test is available. I can set yes here and it will automatically send it out. I would not choose this feature if I'm not ready. I would not say yes and then have it be no because it'll say a test is available when it's not. I'm going to go ahead and click on multiple answers. And if I do that, it's going to allow me unlimited attempts or select however many attempts that I have. If I have number of attempts here, I also can choose which attempt is the attempt that's going to be the final grade. So if I'm allowing students to take 10 question multiple choice quiz, no essay, and it automatically grades, Blackboard will say that from 3 attempts, I'm going to choose the highest grade. And that's all you have to do. Blackboard will automatically find the highest grade and populate that to the student. So the highest grade is always going to be kind of demonstrated to the student after that. So that's why you get to select the amount of attempts or average, first graded, lowest, however you want to determine that. Or unlimited attempts, it still will ask me which one I want. If I don't allow multiple attempts, I don't get that option. It's a one-shot deal. That's all I get. I then have an option. I have 2 options, forced completion and set timer. Forced completion says that if I leave the page in the test, I automatically save the test and I can't go back in. The one problem that I have found over the years with forced completion is that if a student has a weak internet connection or is doing this on a wireless or iPad, which we don't recommend they do, this will kick them out of the exam even if they're not trying to cheat. And for some faculty, that often is more of a pain to come in and re-release the exam to the student. So I often tell people I prefer to set a timer that will automatically submit the exam or quiz after a certain amount of windows and then automatically submit it. I think that's just as fair as going away because I also usually tell you if you usually give 20 minutes for a 5-10 question quiz in a classroom, you can still give 20 minutes. You don't have to give an hour and a half just because it's online. Give the amount of time, maybe a 5-minute extra leeway piece to it. You kind of have that option as well. So you have that option here to do set timer and set that in there. But if you want to use forced completion, feel free to do so, but that might be one of the headaches that kind of comes up for you. That's why I tend to not do it. I can also make my test available, but not display it to the students until after a certain time or date, and I can go ahead and wait till next week, and I'm not going to have it be available. So I can set all of my tests up for the semester and have them all show up. You're going to see a button that says password. Password is really when you do proctoring in a classroom environment. You don't really need a password because there is only one password that you give out. So you'd have to give the password out to all the students anyways. So it's not like a random generalized password in this case. But it would be good to be used for proctoring. Test availability exceptions. This is going to be used when you have accommodation requests, needing to expand time on a particular test date, kind of thing like that. And I'll show you this. A window will appear here and it will show you everybody listed in your class. In this case, I'm going to allow Kyle Kraus student to be in here, and I'm going to go back to Blackboard. I'm gonna go ahead and allow Kyle Kraus student. And based on what I chose for my settings, it's gonna show attempts, timer, and availability. I can allow for multiple attempts. I can allow the student to have 40 minutes instead. I can take the auto submit off. It's gonna let me adjust just for that one student, different functionality. And then in this case, I can allow them 2 attempts. I can also extend their availability to the 21st. So it lets me do that. If I, however, change my mind and I take the timer off, it will remove that feature from the exceptions for the students because no one had the timer. So there's no reason, it's an unlimited attempt. And in this case, I can come back in here and then the button just reappears. If I don't want to, and I can use that for exceptions, or if someone had a death in the family, someone was sick, you can always add that in there as well. I also, as a little trick or tip for people, if you have a larger class with say 10 plus students, you might have multiple accommodations that are more. I sometimes just create a group for exceptions, and then I apply that exception to everybody. If say I find most students that I've worked with in the past have extended time on exams. So I just create a group that's for them, and then anybody that I put in that group is there. But I can also just add each student individually as I get an accommodation request as well. Under here where it says due date, I can assign a due date. It's going to let the students still take the exam unless I click on do not allow students to start the test if the due date has passed. This means that if I've set my test to stop on the 14th at 11:59, the students have exactly until 11:58 and 59 seconds to start the exam, and then they'll still have 20 minutes. At 12:19, no one will have access into the class. So I always tell people it's from the 1 minute before or the 1 second before 11:59, the students have the whole 20-minute window as long as they start it. If I click on this, the link will actually fade and will no longer be accessible. So if I don't care, and the students can just take the exam whenever, but I want to mark it late. And then again, I can choose how to do penalty or adjust the grade appropriately. I can do that, or I can just allow the students not to be able to take the quiz past the date. I then have self-assessment options. Do I want to include this in the grade center? And I think this is because I made my window bigger. I can also hide the results completely from the instructor in the grade center. This is if you're doing practice exams or things that you don't want to see yourself. You can always hide that from yourself. I'm going to say, okay, I don't want that, but this is a quiz that's going to be part of the grading of the class. I then have the option to show the test results and feedback to the students, and this is where I said that report happens. If I want nothing, I check on nothing, and the students will just get a blank page after submission. But if I want them to see the score, if I want them to see feedback, or I want them to see what incorrect questions they got, I can do that as well. This one's a little bit tricky. It is going to always show them the question. So if you're trying to prevent cheating by not having students see the question so that someone could create a rubric, a test feedback to it, I would just always be careful about these selections. If you are an individual who very much worries about cheating in your online quizzes, I would say I'd hold off on the submission information before. So in this case, I'd wait till all availability or due date has happened, or after all attempts are graded. So I would not go, if that's a concern of yours, I would hold off, because no matter what you do, it's going, in order to tell the student any information, it has to display the question. And so if you don't want students to see the question so that they might share the questions, I would uncheck this and then just wait for students to have feedback after. But if it's a practice exam, check on whatever you want. And this will tell you that the little I button will tell you what exactly you're showing. Show the score on each question to the students. Show all possible answers, show feedback to each student, and then mark questions answered incorrectly. So it'll tell you the answers that were marked incorrectly. Why are there 2 rows? You have 2 tiers of feedback. Feedback that you can provide prior to the due date, so one-time view or after submission, and then what happens after that. So if this is a practice, kind of like multiple, like they get to take a bunch of practice exams, they can take a bunch of practice ones, but then the very last one might be, because it's the final one, that's the one where you might wait and give them one shot, one time view. And then after that one time view, they don't see it again until the availability period ends. And so then they could get more. So like in this case, I want to actually just wait until after the due date. So in this case, a one-time view just gives them feedback in the question. After the due date, I might give them all the correct and submitted, and then I can show them the incorrect questions. So it'll give me two tiers of feedback on that. So it's up to you on what you want to display. This is also when I tell people, take your own quizzes and see what you're displaying to your students, and are you okay with that? The last thing in the test preparation area is, how do you want tests to be displayed to students all at once or one at a time? Now, because my window is set up funny, it always does this little thing where it moves the radio button. There is one at a time, which is the checkbox. So you'll see that there. And then prohibit backtracking. And so this button is not working right now. One second. Is it? They're two separate buttons, and it's just not showing because I have my window displayed. Where all at once and one at a time is straight down the page and all at once. Because I made my window bigger to display it to you, it's actually merged the two buttons. But backtracking means students can't go backwards in the quiz. So if you choose one at a time and then also have backtracking, so backtracking is the square button, radio button is one at a time. If you choose this one, it will let them do one at a time, but they can go backwards throughout the one at a time. If you want them to take 1, 2, and not go back to 1, you can actually select prohibit backtracking and it won't let them go backwards. So that's an option for you as well. Then, besides randomizing the answer orders in multiple choice questions, you can also randomize what order the questions come in. So as I said before, my questions all randomize in the multiple choice answers and also in the question area. So if you want to do that, you can do that. But if you want every student that every question 1 is a particular question, every question 2 is a particular one, don't select randomize. Once I hit submit, it's going to say that I don't have a valid time for my test test completion time. So I'm going to say okay. And I didn't do this. So 20 minutes is, actually I wanted 40 minutes for that. So I'm all set. I put all my settings in here. And now under quizzes and exams at the bottom, this is available to my students. It will say it is hidden until August 14th, 2020, 9 a.m. And it has that instructions. And if I click on this here, I get the chapter instructions window, and I can just see that here is my question. And I chose the one at a time sequence. And so you'll see here that it asks me what tool it is, and I can click on test. I save the answer and I save and submit. The system asks me if that's okay. I say yes. And now I get my little receipt. I click on okay. And then my feedback is yes, you create interactive quiz using the test tool. So it doesn't tell me the score, it just gave me the feedback. Yes, you create the interactive quiz. So that's kind of just to let you know that that's kind of how you create it. And now that quiz is just sitting here waiting to be taken by the students, and I can move it up and down in Blackboard however I would like to. Move it up or down. If you're testing this out, you might not want to put your settings on here yet, because if I'm a student and I click on my student preview, I come to my exams and quizzes, it's not there. And it won't show up because I put the settings on it for all my students. And this is replicating a real student experience for me. So I can't test this tool. So if I want to play around and test, I usually will hold off putting my settings for dates until I've tested the quiz first. Otherwise, I can't test it in the student preview. So that's, people will be like, where's my student, the test and student preview. So that's going to be the roundabout way, in the really large context, fast way that I could do it, is how to create a quiz, the type of quiz questions that you want to have, what a quiz looks like, and at the settings. What I normally tell people, like I do in all my workshops, and Karen can attest to this, is that this is the longest you ever spend in the settings window. It's probably the longest that you ever spend in really. My goal is to give you, I want you to be building your class the least amount in Blackboard. So whether you have your questions, you're cutting and pasting, or whatever the case might be, going through these right now, that doesn't take that long. Once you get familiar with what you want your settings to be, you're just going to go in, do your settings, and set your quizzes up. And as I've said before, if on the timeline of creating an online class, creating your lecture videos and your quizzes are going to take a lot of time before, but once the class starts, your lectures are already created, your quizzes already done, they automatically grade, they automatically run, and then the things like discussions and assignments, which usually take a little less time, will become more of your time because those are actually the synchronous component, the live piece of the class, interacting with your students, going back and forth kind of thing as well, or so the more engaging part to it. Any last questions, thoughts, comments? It really was a very brief and fast overview of the quiz tool. Trying to think if there's anything else I can think of. And everyone who knows, I've done a couple workshops on this. I really like using quiz tools and Google Forms to create interactive learning activities. So remember that you can use the quiz tool to not be a traditional assessment tool. And I will really quickly, what window am I in right now? I'm in myself. If I actually go to my own Google Drive really quickly, and I've shown this to people before, you can use the quiz tool in a variety of ways really creatively. And so I have in the past, let me show this one. I have created quizzes in the past. I want to do this. I want to look at this. I've created quizzes that aren't so much a quiz as they're actually kind of a choose your own adventure learning activity, where in both in Blackboard and in Google Forms. And I tell people this particular activity about climate change was in Blackboard when I was at UMass Amherst, and when I moved here, I moved it into Forms just to, have it be a little more transient. But I have students watch a video on climate change. Then, and the reason that I use this particular video is that whenever this show puts things up on the internet, there's always in the corner or at the bottom the site or location of where they're being quoted from. And so what I do is I have this video available, and then what happens is that in this video they talk about Obama's climate action plan, and I want students to actually go to that website and read that website. I want students to then answer questions from the website. I want them to answer what was one fact that was important to you, and then I want them to answer why. And then I want them to search the web, and I want them to tell me what was the difference between something that was written several years ago, and what's today. And I want them to find another statistic. Then I want them another article that's mentioned in this video is also here, and I send students to this, probably never send a stick student to this, but this is a technical writing on like an actual research paper, and I ask students to go to the actual research I want them to go to the results section of the paper, and I want them to come here and I want them to summarize this results section in a paragraph. And so I asked them, write a simplified summary of the results, and then what role do these materials, videos play in the conversation we've been having in the past 2 weeks? So whether it's the quiz tool in Blackboard, or it's the forms in Google, or some other feature, you can use an assessment tool to kind of do a guided journey for people. So I think about if you're talking about a technical piece of equipment, or you're a technical piece of software, and this is also where you could also do a traditional, is I might record a recording of, say, a technical spec for something. I might record a procedure that someone would do, and then I would ask them a bunch of questions about that procedure. And so I would get the student to respond, do an essay, go back and forth. And though that takes a little bit more time, it actually provides the students a self-paced learning activity that also assesses their knowledge. And hopefully in a few weeks, we might be doing some tutorials this way on learning Blackboard and some of the features, so you'll all get a sense of how that looks. I've been building those out slowly for the last couple weeks, but this way it's kind of like choose your own adventure in the way that like you get to answer your questions and go search for things and things like that as well. So that's my one pitch that talks about alternative assessment, but still using an assessment tool. So that's where I'm gonna go with that. And what I normally do here is I just put my very appreciative thank you. I appreciate your time, and let me know how you can help us further. And Mary sometimes in that's why there's the we. And this actually concludes the webinar for today. So I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to stop recording, and I'm going to answer any question you might have. Other than that,